Perhaps it is just the algorithm showing me this, but it seems the world is suddenly obsessed with pedophiles or the conspiracy of pedophiles. Does it symbolize? Oh, I shouldn't laugh. Obviously, that's horrible. But I always laugh in the worst situation. Does it symbolize an abuse of potentiality by the current narrative? For a new narrative to come, that potentiality must be kept safe. Is it in a way connected to the reintegration of symbolism of reintegration you spoke about? Apologies for the heavy topic. Yeah. So obviously, this is the reason why you're seeing it now is because of Epstein. That's why you're seeing it, just because the Epstein case is crunching a lot of symbolism, a lot of conspiracy symbolism that has been around since 2016. Whether it was the Pizzagate stuff, this type of imagery is being crunched into one example, which is the Epstein example. That clearly seems to be that we're being gaslit about, right? That in some ways there's a desire to hide what was really going on there and what was the true motivation of the actions being posed. So that's why you're seeing it, is because it is very relevant right now. And in some ways, there's a weird moment where the right and the left, so you have even the Trump supporters, a lot of the Trump supporters, and even on the left, agreeing that this shouldn't be hidden anymore. Like that whatever it is that was going on with Epstein has to be revealed, right? And all of this is related. All of this is related to the idea of, you could say, strange gods that eat your children. Like that's what it's related to. It's related to the idea that, there are these evil gods, like the evil elites or the bad gods. So you think about it like Moloch, these imagery of Moloch, that these strange gods, these horrible evil gods, they want to eat your children. And that gets reflected in the idea that the elites are not for us, that the elites are serving other intentions rather than the ones that would make our lives better, that they have other goals. Whether those goals are understood spiritually as a cult and as increasing their own power by, like vampires, like basically taking the power of children, whether it is understanding it as that, in fact, our nations secretly serve strange interests, whether those strange interests are something like foreign nations that have a secret hold on us, whether it is that those strange interests are aliens, extraterrestrials that are secretly influencing us. All of these are the images of the same thing. They're the image of this idea of a hierarchy that is like a raptor. So I've talked about this before. It's related to Jack and the Beanstalk, right? There is a manner in which hierarchies can become parasitic and can serve their own interests. And when that happens, they're like vampires. They basically take and they don't give back. So the vampire sucks your blood, and that's it. Like, either you die or you become a parasite like him, right? It doesn't usually, when you pay up, right, in a hierarchy, right, you give taxes, you give service to the people that are above you, then they're responsible for you, right? So think of a medieval system of a feudal system where people were serfs on the land. They owed honor and work and some aspect of their work, of what they produced, to their lord. But then their lord has to take care of them, right? Their lord is responsible for their housing and responsible for all of their things. But when a system becomes parasitic for all kinds of reasons, then that imagery starts to pervade. And so the idea of because it's, think of pedophilia as something like, pedophilia is not fruitful, right? It doesn't yield a world, right? If you have relationships with children, you don't create families and babies. You basically, it's like a vampire. You just take pleasure without participating in the creation of the world. And that's true at a technical sense, in the sense that children can't have babies. But it's true also in a social sense, in the sense that you're basically destroying innocence and destroying children in order to get power and pleasure for yourself, right? So the symbolism, the reason why the pedophile symbolism is so pervasive right now is that it is the like really, really bright and pointed image of the reason why conspiracy theory is going on in the first place, which is that people have an intuition that the elites of our world are serving interests which aren't ours. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. So we can kind of see how all of this is connected to each other. And, it's hard to know in terms of what the facts are, like how much of this is speculation and how much of this is kind of fever dreaming on the part of people that are speculating about it, and how much of it is actually describing events that are happening in the world. But even if we can't access that, like even if we can't really in the end know what it is that's always exactly what's happening, paying attention to how the story plays out can still tell you a lot about what's going on in the world. It can still tell you a lot about what's happening. So the story of Epstein has all of it in there. Yeah, all of it is in there. And it's real, and the fact that Epstein, the danger of Epstein, you could say, revealing that the United States is subject to foreign intelligences that have influence on it through using, blackmail and all of that. All of these are the same type of symbolism. Gohar M says, we'll be closely following the way the Brigitte Macron and Candance Owens lawsuit plays out. That's a really interesting story also to kind of, obviously don't pay too much attention to it because it's kind of like, how can I say this? Like right-wing tabloids, I guess, is a good way of thinking about what that is. But it's an interesting story to pay attention to, because again, it represents in some ways the same kind of thing. It represents the idea that our elites are serving other goals rather than the good of the nation, and that gets captured mythologically in their story. So, for example, whether or not, let's say, Brigitte Macron is a transgender, our elites have been pushing transgenderism on us for a decade now, for more than a decade, for 15 years maybe. And so it's normal that these types of stories will culminate into these mythological little nuggets where you end up having, you have Candance Owens basically suspecting that they are what they're promoting, like that they are what they're promoting out in the world, and that is not to the favor of the nation, that it is serving other purposes, that it's serving other goals that aren't good for us. Because, obviously, in our case, it leads to demographic collapse, leads to the mental breakdown of our youth, and to suicidality, and to all this kind of craziness. But then, it's kind of normal. Like it's not just Macron. Like the same story has been repeated now with Michelle Obama, and then Macron, and then all of these. It's kind of inevitable that happens because these elites have been pushing this on us now for a very long time. And so there's a kind of funny irony, which is that as you then take a mirror and you put it back up to them and you say, oh, well, then maybe that's what you are. Then all of a sudden they freak out and they're like, how dare you slander us? How dare you say these things about us? But it's like, you've been telling us that that's what we should be for decades now. So why are you insulted that I'm lifting the mirror up back at you? And so whether or not she was biologically a man, it's an interesting story to follow, to see, how these stories get mythologized and how they end up kind of, looping back. So True More V says, man, I miss when people were just depressed instead of all this fancy new stuff. So yeah, so Gohar M says, is she transgendered? Not sure. Is she a pedophile? And then she says, she's like, I mean, yeah. So that's also an aspect of this whole thing, which is that, when she dated the president of France, he was like 14, I think, or 15. And she was in her 30s, if I remember correctly. I might be getting some of the ages wrong, but for sure, it was an inappropriate relationship, right? And so that's, again, one of those places where it's like all of these mythological images are kind of crunching into examples that are happening on the world stage, where these figures that are suspected of all this behavior are exemplifying it and then hiding from it. And so it's an interesting story to just kind of marginally at least pay attention to, and in some ways you could think about it like this is the image of the end of empire, and so as during the dark times of the Roman Empire, there were all of these kinds of behaviors that the elites were engaged in their kind of crazy orgies. And the story, if you know the story of Hadrian's lover, who killed himself, and then also Nero, he had a young boy castrated because the boy reminded him of his wife, and he started acting as Nero's wife. And it's like all of this stuff has already happened. Like all of this stuff has already been around, and so it's not surprising that it's coming back when our empire, you could say, is also kind of falling apart.